Aaron Kaufman was the heart of Gas Monkey Garage, not the face, not the brand, but the hands that turned rusted shells into something worth watching. While Richard Rawlings worked the room and played to the cameras, Kaufman stood at the lift and did the work, and that distinction matters more now than it ever did during the show's run. In 2018, after 6 years and 60 episodes of Fast and Loud, Kaufman walked out without a goodbye episode, without a farewell speech, and without any dramatic exit for the cameras to capture, and for a long time, almost nobody outside that garage knew the real reason why. Before Gas Monkey, before the television deal, before any of it, Kaufman was a kid from Texas who cared about how things worked at a level most people never develop. Fame never drove him, building did. By the time he reached his 20s, he'd developed the kind of mechanical intuition that no classroom produces, the ability to fabricate, weld, design, and engineer at a level that most professional shops couldn't touch. That skill set was precisely what Rawlings needed when he was assembling Gas Monkey Garage, and it's what made Kaufman not just useful to Fast and Loud, but the load-bearing wall holding the whole structure up. Strip him out, and what remains is a television personality talking about automobiles that nobody's actually building. For 6 years, that arrangement held. Rawlings handled the personality side. Kaufman handled everything else. The show pulled millions of viewers into the world of custom cars and reality television, and real money ran through that garage. But underneath the production gloss, something was wearing thin, and by 2018, Kaufman had burned through whatever patience he'd been running on. The full story of what happened has surfaced in pieces because Kaufman doesn't sit down for emotional tell-alls. Rawlings told the public the split was mutual, that Kaufman wanted his own path, that everybody parted cleanly, and the Gas Monkey narrative stayed vague and airtight. What Kaufman has shared, scattered across a handful of rare interviews, tells a more complicated version. The financial structure of the show sat at the center of it, specifically the way money moved through that operation, or failed to move toward the people doing the actual fabrication work, and that frustration compounded over years rather than arriving all at once. Beyond the money, reality television demanded something that genuine craft never does. It required him to perform a version of himself that wasn't fully real, to build on production timelines instead of his own standards, to function as a character as much as a craftsman. For someone whose identity runs entirely on the integrity of the work, that tension doesn't resolve. It accumulates until something gives. So Kaufman left. And then, with no cameras rolling and no network behind him, he got to work building something that was actually his. Arclight Fabrication came together the way Kaufman operates, without announcements, without press releases, without any of the noise surrounding television-adjacent business launches. He built an aftermarket parts company around the Ford F-100, a classic truck with a devoted ownership community and a genuine shortage of quality components available to them, and no comeback angle drove this decision. What Kaufman built ran entirely on skill and earned reputation, with no cable network giving it oxygen. By most estimates, his net worth reached around $8 million, accumulated without a single camera pointed at him, grown on the same hands that once made Rawlings' Discovery Channel show worth watching every week. In a 2025 interview, Kaufman said something about Rawlings that landed nothing like what anyone anticipated, and it wasn't anger, it wasn't bitterness, and it wasn't the kind of accusation that hands tabloid channels a week's worth of content. What came across was something far more cutting than any of that, because anger at its core means the other person still holds weight over you, still registers, still matters in some way. What Kaufman expressed read as settled indifference, a calm and philosophical detachment from that chapter, the kind that only develops when someone has genuinely moved past something rather than just claimed to. Gas Monkey and Rawlings came up the way a person recalls a job from their 20s, one that taught them something real, but that they outgrew years before they finally quit. No venom came through, and the absence of it lands harder than venom would've. When someone who carried that much of your success looks back at everything built side by side and describes it with the emotional register of a man recounting a car he once sold, that communicates something no argument ever could, and it reframes their entire time together in a way that's difficult to shake once you hear it. What Kaufman has shared across these interviews follows a clear pattern, even when the interviews themselves feel scattered. He never names Rawlings in an attack. He never replays specific arguments or lines up grievances in sequence. Instead, he talks about what he values: the craft, the authenticity of the work, building things designed to last, and in doing so, draws a contrast sharper than any direct accusation would. Working without production schedules felt like breathing again, by his own account. Arclight represented the first time the fabrication work felt fully his. None of that names Rawlings directly, and all of it lands squarely on him, and the accumulated picture of what those 6 years at Gas Monkey actually cost Kaufman becomes clear to anyone paying attention across the full run of interviews. The 2025 statement that cut deepest was about legacy, about what Kaufman believes people will remember, and more pointedly, what he wants to be remembered for. Asked directly whether Gas Monkey Garage belonged in the defining chapter of his story, his answer came back as a clear no, delivered without visible frustration and without the pause that would have signaled he was softening something harder underneath. Television played no part in what he described as his proudest work. What made the list was Arclight, the parts, the fabrication, the F100 ownership community that trusts what comes out of his shop, the automotive enterprise no production company packaged and no network built a platform around. For a man who spent the better part of a decade as one of the most recognized faces in automotive television, that answer carries real weight. A line gets drawn between who the camera decided he was and who he actually is, and he drew it without drama, which is exactly what makes it feel permanent in a way a public falling out never would have managed. Rawlings, for his part, hasn't engaged with what Kaufman has started saying publicly. Deflections have come, passing references to moving forward, vague goodwill toward Kaufman in general terms, acknowledgement that the show was something and that people take different directions. The financial questions raised go without response. The characterization of the working environment goes unaddressed. Rawlings has developed a skill for narrative control over years in reality television, and the approach here reads as deliberate. Don't amplify what Kaufman is saying by acknowledging it directly. Don't give it a larger stage. Let it circulate without picking it up and handing it a megaphone. Whether that holds as Arclight's profile keeps growing is a separate question entirely. 6 years of Kaufman's work made Rawlings a household name inside car culture, inside reality television, inside the broader automotive community that followed fast and loud. Every build that hit right, every transformation that stopped someone mid-channel surf, every moment where that show felt like more than a cable production, that came from Kaufman's hands, his engineering instincts, his willingness to stay on an automobile until it was done correctly. The cameras credited Rawlings as the architect throughout, and none of that stopped Kaufman from walking away without a safety net. No television deal waiting, no network offering him a platform, no shortcut back to visibility of any kind. What followed was a return to the only thing that had always been consistently true about him. He could build things other people couldn't, and that reputation alone could carry a business if the work stayed real. Arclight proved it, not through a viral moment or a sudden surge of attention, but through steady, credible, undeniable growth that compounded over years. Kaufman never fell, which means the comeback narrative applied to him doesn't actually fit. What happened was simpler and more revealing than a comeback. He stopped letting someone else take the credit, walked into his own shop as an entrepreneur with nothing but skill behind him, and let the automobiles speak for him.